morning, folks. This is Deb Delapiana, and this is your chain reaction report. I apologize, but it is very early, and I'm still trying to get it going. But we have a few things we should really cover. Okay, so first of all, let me acknowledge that this has been an extremely rough, couple weeks with regard to Roe v. Wade. That everybody's emotions are pretty much, still right at the surface level. Okay, so it's a touchy topic, and we get it and we acknowledge it. Okay, all of us in the group pretty much are still kind of pissed off over this. Okay, but not just pissed off at the government. Okay, because we have been led down a garden path, we women, and we really did trust the wrong people. But we'll talk about that in a separate video, because the conversation today is going to be taking a look at, not just Roe, which we have been doing. We have a group on Facebook. We have the whole 9 yards. Okay, we got it. But looking at what else the Supreme Court did that was egregious in this term. And when you look at all of these things in aggregate, it becomes extremely clear what's going on in this country. If it doesn't become extremely clear to people when they look at things in aggregate, that there is some bad shit afoot here, then clearly they don't understand history and how history repeats itself. And I'm not just talking about, history in a specific country. I'm talking about history as in the world, as it applies to the United States of America, which, by the way, in comparison to European nations and other nations around the world, we're still babies in these woods. There are a lot of cultures, and, believe it or not, all you 1776 Restoration Movement folks, there are a lot of cultures and countries that have been around the horn far more than the United States of America. Okay, so let's move on from here. I'm having a problem with this hearing. You notice that? Yeah. Well, we'll worry about that later. So anyway, so we had Roe v. Wade, which is, by the way, one of the most egregious things ever to happen in American history. The fact of the matter is that they ignored precedent entirely and took a law that was 50 years old and just basically gutted it without blinking an eye. We have the "we'll adopt your baby" routine, which, by the way, let me just say, I understand people have a sense of humor, but the memes, guys, listen to me. When you take on something like that, in a fight like this for people's civil rights, and you make jokes of it, the right wing just keeps going with it because they know they got you hooked. You really need to get a clue with how they work. All right. So let's move on. Let's take a quick look back at how we got here. So we had, a Supreme Court, and we had an administration led by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump got to appoint 3 justices. He appointed Neil Gorsuch, he appointed Brett Kavanaugh, and he appointed Amy Coney Barrett, who, for all intents and purposes, is in a Christian Catholic religious cult. They're all Catholics, by the way, with an affiliation to a group called Opus Dei, which is a Catholic group that, while not forcing its loyal members, it's a secret society, and it's been in existence for a while. There have been people in Opus Dei well before these folks, okay? It's an ancient society, but they're all members of that, and what that, I call it a cult, but, it's a group, instructs its adherents to do is to attempt to apply your beliefs, religious beliefs, to your secular work, okay? Which means to take into consideration your Catholic upbringing when you make decisions on the Supreme Court. So, first of all, appointing people like that is inconsistent with what this court is supposed to be all about. So, they did this, and they got to this point because the Christian right, fundamentalists, whatever you want to call them, Diminionists, and the Catholic clergy found a way to bury the hatchet on their beliefs. Okay? And they did that in specific to go after Roe v. Wade. And, you know, Donald Trump's Supreme Court paid off that mission. And it's been a mission in the making. And they did this by building coalitions, which is really what we should be doing right now. But we'll talk about that at the end for a few minutes, okay? So let's talk about what else they did this week besides Roe v. Wade. The first thing, I mean, these aren't in chronological order, so bear with me. But the first thing was they struck down the New York law on concealed carry, which means now you can conceal carry in New York. And, you know, we're not talking about, you know, just food stores or anything like that. We're talking about, you know, sports stadiums. You know, we're talking about subways. So they have, in the face of all of this killing going on in the United States and just touting this entire, you know, bipartisan gun law, which just got passed after I don't know how many fucking eons of trying to get something done and people dead in the streets, you know, children dead in their schoolrooms. The pro-life party, remember that. But only when they're in the womb. Out of the womb, they're a liability. They gutted that bill. And there are ramifications for more than New York. Massachusetts, where I live, has one of the most strict gun bills. We don't have mass shootings here in schools. We haven't. Knock on wood, because it can happen anywhere. But right now, some nitwit can go ahead now because that's been challenged in New York. It affects the whole East Coast, which is pretty strict gun laws, the Northeast, okay? So in the face of all of this, and by the way, since Sandy Hook, the Supreme Court has been slowly gutting the gun laws in this country. Just did like they did with Roe v. Wade, slow and measured over time. So you almost don't, you know, you almost get kind of lulled into shit like, well, that's not so bad. Well, you know, 28 weeks to 15 weeks, that's not so bad. And then from 15 down to 6, well, at least it's not gone. You know, that's what happens, people. That's what happens here anyway. Then let's talk about Miranda. Now you can no longer sue police departments when they fail to read you your rights. Okay? Which is a very slippery slope in America. Okay? So now not only is that the case, but it is now incumbent upon the person being arrested to remember to invoke their First Amendment rights. So, I understand hardened criminals probably can handle this shit, but what about people who are getting arrested for shit that they don't understand why they're getting arrested? In the middle of getting arrested, which is an upsetting situation, you now have to remember to invoke your First Amendment rights or all bets are off and you are fucking dead in the water before you even start. Understand this, people. Look at them in aggregate, understand where we're going here. Yesterday, the Supreme Court delivered another death knell when they limited what the government can do, what the EPA can do to control emissions from power plants. A major source of pollution in the air that harms people health-wise. They literally just gutted the Clean Air Act, which has been in place and which is very important, but now they also made it absolutely impossible for Joe Biden to meet his climate goals. And this, again, is a concerted effort by the Republican Party, which believes climate change is made up by the Democrats. Well, the extreme right out there, the whack jobs, the wackadoodles that follow Donald Trump and his minions. The rest of the GOP, all they care about is the fact that they need to take care of their business pals. Right? So this is, just like the gas prices, my good friends, there's not a lever in the White House where Joe Biden's moving it up and down. It's called deregulation. None of you wanted that on the right. Remember that? You wanted them deregulated so they could pork you every time there's a crisis. That's exactly what's going on. But if you ask the Democrats, if you push the bill today to go back and regulate the gas and the oil industry in this country, you'd never get it passed in this legislature because that's not what the GOP wants. And right now the tail is wagging the dog here. So all of this has been going on here, right? And in aggregate, when you look at this, there is one more. Don't let me forget this one, okay? Do not let me forget this one. They also, in the state of Oklahoma, voted or handed down a decision that says that the government can now prosecute non-tribal people on tribal lands for crimes. Now, probably when you take that on its face, it sounds like a good thing, no one will be able to run to tribal lands to hide. Not that this happens very often, I can promise you that. But in circumspect, in the big picture, what they have just done is demolished the notion of tribal sovereignty. They have literally just taken the last vestige of control tribal people have over themselves, one of the last vestiges of control, and demolished it in the courts. And you know what? That's not okay. I believe there are 22 tribes in that area. I'm not sure that that's actually entirely accurate, but I'll look for some information on that. I'll put that in here as well. But we are headed down the highway to hell here. I mean, this is nothing short of full frontal fascism. We have two characters at play also here. And this is what happens when people, talk about fascism, it is, oppressing. That's the piece of it. But the other thing that's happening is corporations get unfettered access to the government. They get unfettered access to being able to strike down rules and regulations that are put in place for the public health. The Clean Air Act is certainly one of those. The Clean Water Act, I worked in a company that developed that technology for the government in 1974. All right? So we have other things at play here. There's a guy named Peter Thiel who helped to build Facebook. He was on Facebook's board. He was a Silicon Valley player. He is now forsaken all of that and is funding extreme right-wing candidates on his path to turning the Republican Party into what is being called the new right. That's akin to being called fascism and Nazism in my book. Okay? You're looking at it right here. You're looking at Roe alone being something that affects millions of people. Gay and lesbian people, transgender people, and other people whose rights have been argued along the same lines as Roe. This guy's building the new right. They want to get rid of the woke culture, which we'll talk about at some point. I'm proud to be woke. Woke means you understand that there are people here besides white people and Christian people. Okay, that this country was built, on the backs of a whole bunch of different cultures from a lot of different religious backgrounds as well. Not a Christian nation. Fuck you. If that's what woke is, I'm good. I'm good with it. You call me that any old day. I don't really give a shit what you think of me. Okay? I'm just telling you the way it is. Get a clue. Full frontal fascism is right at your doorstep, folks. You know, the little Nazi down there in Florida has been driving the test train, along with along with Arizona and Texas, most recently, is taking their little state on a trip down hell. All the states that used to be swing states in the election are now red, deeply. And this is not by accident. We need to, you know something? They're beating us in our system. We need to fight back in this system. To think that you can beat this by just not participating is absurd. It's a fucking golden path to power for these people. Do this at your own peril. I mean, you either want to do something with the information you have or you don't. But we spend quite a bit of time on this outside of our real lives, which is with families and, you know, work so you can put food on the table and so you can keep doing this shit. This is what we do. This is our spare time. And I'm retired, supposedly, but you'd never know it. I'll talk to you later. Sorry. You know, I forgot 2 little points. This happens. It's early. Okay, give me a break. So, not only do you have Peter Thiel, who's, you know, a mega millionaire, he's going to pour money into now the midterms. That's his goal here, to get extremist candidates into the midterms. And we have no shortage of that, folks. I want you to understand that we already have, out of 221 Republicans in office this minute, 147 of them voted to overturn a legitimate election. We have seditionists running the government right now and getting in the way of everything that everybody wants to get done. Using the filibuster to kill Build Back Better, using the filibuster to kill the Voting Rights Act. There's not much you can do about that except deliver a bigger majority. That's all I'm going to say about that. But there's another guy at play here, and his name is Elon Musk, you know, and everybody is just all agaga over Elon because he's going to buy Twitter and he's going to restore free speech to everybody. By the way, that's another conversation for another day, what a cesspool of bullshit and misinformation the internet actually is. Okay? It's ripe for propaganda everywhere. But Elon Musk, you know, literally just decided he doesn't want to be woke anymore either. So he has just gotten rid of his entire LGBTQ group of people in his company. All of that is now gone. He's just gotten rid of everybody. Because the woke culture is out of vogue here in America. What's here now is the bigotry, white supremacy, anti-Semite, anti-gay and anti-trans, you know, a bunch of transphobes. That's what's ruling elite here now. So a word to the wise. If we as women, if we as lesbians, and, you know, actually LGBTQ, transgender, Native American, people of color all across this nation, united, we could beat this thing. But until we decide that we are all the ones who are at risk here, and if you haven't figured that out yet by listening to my little list, then you are seriously not awake. If you haven't figured this out and you can't find a way to get this together, then we're doomed. Again, I'll talk to you later.